Hello and welcome to the State of Shakespeare. I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And today on the program we have Zuzanna Szadowski. Welcome, Zuzanna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for being here.
Zuzanna Szadowski played Dorada in the CW's hit drama series Gossip Girl. She can be seen as Nurse Pell on the Cinemax series from Steven Soderbergh's The Nick. Her off-Broadway theater credits include Queens at LCT 3, Peter Pan with Bedlam, The Comedy of Errors is part of the Public Theater's mobile Shakespeare unit, and Nora and Delia Ephron's Love, Loss, and What I Wore. She has a BA from Barnard College and an MFA in acting from the ART MXAT Institute at Harvard, and she is currently appearing in Bedlam's Uncle Romeo Vanya Juliet here in New York City.
So we've had guests from Bedlam on before, and Bedlam is one of the theater companies in New York that's getting an awful lot of buzz for doing very experimental and very impactful work. But this is something completely new.
Oh yes, this is something nobody has ever seen before. I'm really taking a risk here.
So tell us about it. What is this mashup of Romeo and Juliet and Uncle Vanya, and how does it work?
Well, Eric Tucker, who's directing us and conceived of the idea, originally wanted to do Uncle Vanya. He had that on his mind for a while, and then he wanted to do Romeo and Juliet in rep, because that's something that Bedlam does a lot. So he had kind of felt like those two plays were simpatico, and he was interested in pairing them. And then as he started to kind of work on it, I think he had a sort of revelation that there are these themes and sort of moments of action that pop out that kind of parallel each other in both stories. So then he just took the risk and decided we were going to smush them into one play, which is exactly what we did. So we took basically an 8-week rehearsal period, which is pretty good for an off-Broadway show. Yeah. So we really got to get in there and like dig around and try to figure out what this thing was going to be that we were going to make. So essentially what we've kind of landed on is, even for people who will come to see it, it is, you're getting 2 plays in one, 5 actors, and the plays sort of work, you could say, to illuminate each other. And we're kind of looking at the world of Uncle Vanya, looking at these characters of Uncle Vanya who are sort of lovelorn and also inactive and live with a lot of regret and heaviness. And then they kind of have this opportunity to transform into characters from Romeo and Juliet that are, in a way, contrast that. So they're these characters who are very active and passionate and, do what they want and go for it and kill themselves and, and do all this stuff that the characters in Vanya don't do. So you kind of have, it's hard to explain.
Does the action shift from one play to the other sort of serially, or are they happening simultaneously? Is it a mixture
there are
of both?
some moments where they happen simultaneously, but most clearly I can say that it's sort of like we're in the world of Uncle Vanya, and then all of a sudden, from the point of view of Vanya, he becomes a Romeo, and we see him play out his sort of Romeo fantasy with his Juliet, which in the Uncle Vanya world is Yelena, because here he has this unrequited love. So then it's like all of a sudden he gets to almost dream or fantasize about being Romeo to his Juliet. So we sort of veer into the world of R&J for a minute, and then we kind of come back into Vanya and then have another moment where we're seeing Romeo and Juliet through the eyes of Yelena, and she's Juliet, but her Romeo is Astroff from Uncle Vanya. And so you see, we kind of end up showing you the meeting of Romeo and Juliet, the palm-to-palm scene, the balcony scene, the murder of Tybalt, and all of everything that follows. You'll see that in our play, but you see it sort of in moments that come out of relationships in Uncle Vanya. So it is an interesting experiment, because I think we originally thought, okay, how can we do both plays at the same time? And then what we ended up with, as Eric likes to say, is we no longer have Uncle Vanya or Romeo and Juliet or Uncle Vanya and Romeo and Juliet. We have a new third play. So it's composed of pieces of both. And the architecture, the sort of the skeleton of the play, is more the story of Uncle Vanya. But you do get we kind of hit most of the stuff in Romeo and Juliet. We don't have everything, but we have a lot. We've managed somehow to get it in there.
And the other elements are being drawn in as well. There are pop culture references being drawn in, and it's not strictly limited to Romeo and Juliet and Uncle Vanya.
Yeah, something about total eclipse of the heart.
Oh, yes, we do have that. Well, the Uncle Vanya adaptation is written by Kimberly Powell, who is actually the managing director of Bedlam, and she's also a playwright. And what we did was we commissioned a translator to do a literal translation in the Russian, And then from that translation, Kimberly worked to make her own contemporary translation of Uncle Vanya. So it's very contemporary language, very sort of easy and free, and a great adaptation on its own. I think it's really fun to play. And so because of that, and as we explore that world, we are able to have these moments. There's a scene in Uncle Vanya where Yelena and Sonia turn on some music. And in our play, we turn on the radio and we get a total eclipse of the heart, and we get to sort of rock out and express ourselves before our urges get stomped on by the professor who tells us to be quiet. So in those moments, it's fun because we get total eclipse of the heart. We have a little bit of Avalon by Roxy. We have fun music and fun sort of contemporary feeling, and great verse and sort of huge emotional palette that we get to play with because we also have Romeo and Juliet. So it's certainly unlike any normal Chekhov play, because the one way to think about it too is that we have an opportunity to sort of play the subtext or inner monologue of these Chekhovian characters, with the language of Shakespeare. So they're in essence, a possibility to really blow up their sort of inner lives by kind of going into Romeo and Juliet. That's one way to think about it.
One of the reviews I read says that Chekhov's characters become the foundation from which you, the actors, can vault into Shakespeare's verse and heights. And when you do that, we see your souls expand, and then these wild flights make their landings back in Uncle Vanya, back in a world much more like ours, where people don't kill their rivals or die for love or burn out gloriously, but simply keep on aging, hurting, and living. And I think that's really an interesting contrast.
Oh, yes. It's great. And it feels so, as an actor, it's a really wonderful opportunity because you can create these Chekhovian characters and kind of flesh those out. And then you take all that bottled up stuff and fly into verse. There's one other thing that's interesting about the mashup itself, which is our cast. There are 5 of us, and we are, kind of middle-aged, you could say, for lack of a better word. None of us are young enough to be in Romeo and Juliet, and none of us are really old enough to be some of the older characters in Uncle Vanya. And so one of the things that Eric Tucker was interested in is this idea of how people who are jaded, who have fallen out of love, who have felt all sort of the feelings of adult life, how those people can inhabit the world of Romeo and Juliet. And so that to me is one of the most satisfying things as an actor of this mashup, is that I am playing Yelena in the world of Vanya, and I'm playing Juliet, and I'm about to have my big 40th birthday in 2 weeks. So it's
congratulations.
Here I am, but here I am playing Juliet, and it's to me really interesting to look at especially those speeches and those, the relationship between Romeo and Juliet, and how and the language that Juliet uses, that sort of passionate hopefulness coming out of the sort of body and mindset of Yelena, I think is really interesting. I think what the audience gets is something that they haven't seen before. And I think it's a really cool way to hear Romeo and Juliet, which is a play I've always really liked and have seen a million times. And I feel like the stuff just comes out much differently out of our mouths,
So obviously this is a very unique take on Chekhov. For someone who's a Chekhov lover like you, does it feel in any way transgressive?
You know what? It doesn't, because I think there is a inherent Russianness in Chekhov that when Americans are making Chekhov, that we're missing something in the equation, because it's not our cultural language. I don't know. There are all these universal human themes, I think, in Chekhov, but there's also this other thing that I feel like we kind of put Shakespeare in there and made it our own. And I think there's something about a really great production of Uncle Vanya where you feel like the actors are inhabiting it in such a way that it is just coming out of them. I feel like there's some kind of a equation with Chekhov that you can get just right. And I think that what we did and with our adaptation, and then also by sort of redigesting it and changing its metabolism by adding this Romeo and Juliet, is that we're able to step inside and create it anew, which is, I think, maybe the best way to get at Uncle Vanya. When I had all the Russian teachers, the artistic director who recently passed away from the Moscow Art Theater, Oleg Tabakov, is like one of Russia's greatest actors. And he came and taught us a masterclass, and we worked actually on Uncle Vanya. We worked on a scene. The girls did Sonia, and then the men did Astrov and Vanya, sort of sitting there and they're having a drunken conversation. And I remember that we got about 10 minutes into the class before he just stopped everything, and he spent the rest of the 3 hours teaching us how to drink vodka, because he was like, you guys are not, he's like, you can't do the play, you can't be drinking these shots in this fake way. And he was like, you guys don't understand what it's like to drink vodka. So he had and
that is brilliant.
His Russian sensibility, it was like, you guys are blowing it as step one. But yeah, so I feel like it's definitely some sort of sacrilege. I think there's something special about it. We have a wonderful man named Isaac who is working with Bedlam, and he kind of is our consultant, our Russian consultant. And he has been sitting in rehearsal, and he's such a passionate theater goer, theater lover, and new to New York from Moscow. And he told us the other day that he thinks that Chekhov would really like what we've done, because he says that what he sees us trying to do is trying to land things with the audience in a way that he feels like is more like the essence that Chekhov should have than a lot of the stuff that he sees, the Chekhov that Americans make. So I think that by challenging ourselves in this weird way, where it's been Bedlam's mission statement that they like to prioritize the immediacy in the relationship with the audience. And I think by doing that, making this crazy weird thing that we're having that experience in the room.
I find it really fascinating because, there's those people who say that Shakespeare has no subtext. And by using Shakespeare as a Chekhovian inner monologue, I think that's brilliant, because that's what your inner monologue is, right? No subtext.
Yes, exactly. No, I think it is. That's the cool thing. And I think we're trying it, and I will say, it's an imperfect thing that we've made, and it's a real experiment. And it's, in a way, we ask the question, like, can these two plays live together? And the answer is not a resounding absolutely yes, but the experiment is really worth it for that very reason that you're saying, because there is something really electric about playing Shakespeare in that way, like letting it be the subtext inner monologue of these other characters.
Yeah.
Some of the productions of Chekhov that I've enjoyed the most really are funny. Very, very funny.
Yes.
And I've seen enough to know that it feels like that's right. That as world weary as Chekhovian characters can be, there's a great sense of humor about it. But I've never seen a very funny production of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring out, because our adaptation of Chekhov, I think that Kimberly Powell really leaned into the comedy, and we're having fun on stage too. I think that we get a lot of laughs, especially in the Chekhov. And then what happens by sticking Romeo and Juliet with it, actually what we learned when we brought it in front of an audience, because we didn't feel this in the rehearsal room, is that really we're doubling the tragedy. So when we get to Act 2 of our play, we're kind of with, it's like Romeo has killed Tybalt and everything's going downhill for R&J. And then in the world of Chekhov, we're sort of coming to a climax, and then everyone's sort of being left in their misery. So we kind of accidentally doubled the tragedy, which is one of the kind of, in a sense, one of the most interesting parallels, which is why Eric was drawn to put the two plays side by side, was that, you have in the world of Uncle Vanya, these characters are sort of left to a slow death. Like if you're looking at Vanya specifically, the play ends with these, he's just sitting in this cubicle for the rest of his life, just dying. And so in Romeo and Juliet, you have this like passionate, active, energized suicide. So in a way, by butting the plays up together, you're seeing him die twice. It's kind of cool because one of the things I thought about from the beginning was that our play it's kind of like, what if Romeo and Juliet didn't go through with it, and then they had to grow up and live and then sit in an office for the rest of their lives. So
I don't know which is worse.
Yeah, so I think there's something about it where we're definitely exploring the tragedy in that way. But I think there is something funny actually about, I don't think there's a lot of funny Romeo and Juliets, and I think ours is maybe a little funnier because we're playing those parts, and because of the way that the story mashes up, we get some funny moments. The death of Tybalt is one that comes to mind, because we definitely need to kill Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet in order to tell the story of Romeo and Juliet. You need that moment. And so in Uncle Vanya, the Vanya shoots at the professor and misses. So we kind of, in our world, the two stories collapse on each other in that moment. So in essence, it's like Vanya shoots the professor and the professor dies as Tybalt. So it's kind of like you have either Vanya shoots Tybalt or it's a complicated moment, but it always gets a laugh because it's so ridiculous. And it's one of those great things where if you can make the really heightened moments of Romeo and Juliet where really bad stuff happens are also funny moments in Uncle Vanya, and those two things can exist at once, I think we're doing like a magic trick there.
You don't know whether to laugh or cry or be horrified.
Yeah, because we're committing. So like people laugh because Tybalt dies, and then 10 seconds later we're keening our faces off, and really having going all the way into the world of Romeo and Juliet and not backing off of the life and death stakes. So there is something comedic about just that approach, and is a weird sensation for the audience.
So the speech that you've chosen to share with us today is from Romeo and Juliet. It's
Yes.
Juliet's speech. It's from Act 3, Scene 2. So maybe we should get the context for where how this works in Romeo and Juliet first, and then hear it, and then we'll see how it fits into the Vanya story. Does that make sense?
Okay. Sure. We have in Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is waiting for her Romeo and for her big night. her big night as a wife, and the sort of, I mean, to me, this is the reason I picked this, is because it's the one that gets at all of that, because I am, here I am 40 years old waiting for my my night of becoming a woman.
So
Really.
this is the night where they're going to consummate their
Yeah.
passion. All of they've worked it out secretly to put all the things in place so that they can have the secret stolen night of passion.
That's right.
And in this moment, it's just before she's waiting for Romeo to arrive, and this scene is set.
Gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds, toward Phoebus' lodging. Such a wagoner's phaeton would whip you to the west and bring in cloudy night immediately. Oh, spread thy close curtain, love-performing night, that runaways' eyes may wink, and Romeo leap to these arms untalked of and unseen. Lovers can see to do their amorous rites by their own beauties. Or if love be blind, it best agrees with night. Come, civil night, thou sober-suited matron, all in black, and learn me how to lose a winning match, played for a pair of stainless maidenhoods. Hood my unmanned blood, bathing in my cheeks, with thy black mantle, till strange love grow bold. Think true love acted simple modesty. Oh, come night, come Romeo, come thou day and night, for thou wilt lie upon the wings of night, whiter than new snow upon a raven's back. Come, gentle night, come loving black-browed night, and give me my Romeo. And when I shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he shall make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun. Oh, I have bought the mansion of a love, but not possessed it. And though I'm sold, not yet enjoyed. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Where does this fall in Uncle Romeo Vanya Juliet, which I love saying?
Yes, it falls. So here's what happens in our thing. So I'm I don't know, explain. So basically, in Uncle Vanya, you have Sonia comes to Yelena and tells her that her heart is breaking and she's in love with Astroff, and she's distraught, and basically Yelena agrees that she'll speak to Astroff on Sonia's behalf, and says, I'll find out if he loves you or not. And then Sonia leaves to go get Astroff, and Yelena has this moment alone where she basically reveals to the audience in a soliloquy that, wow, it's a difficult situation, because she knows Astroff doesn't love Sonia, and she's kind of hot for Astroff. And then she kind of, in the course of this soliloquy, basically cops to the audience and to herself that she's going, she's going to sort of follow her heart and, let herself have these feelings with Astroff, and she's going to have this kind of conversation with him. So it's like she's basically making the decision that she's going to betray Sonia, and she's going to live for once in her life, and she's battling with herself, but Astroff is on his way in. So that's the scene when we were rehearsing. We thought this is kind of the place for Gallop Apace, because it's, in essence, in our play, we don't have Juliet, the virgin, and Romeo, the virgin teen. Like,
right.
what we have are adults kind of grappling with unrequited love, or grappling with these passions. And so in our play, Gallop Apace serves similarly, and she's anticipating Astroff's entrance, but she's also anticipating what she's about to do, which is not lose her virginity, but she's about to become an adulterer in some small sense. And so all of that the imagery, I think, about night in the speech, for me, it's really interesting when I'm performing it too. It's very easy to translate into my adult mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I talk about maidenhoods in the speech, but I think the idea of night hiding this, hooding the blood bathing in my cheeks, and this idea of losing virginity becomes, in our adult context, losing innocence, because I think Yelena has been a good wife to her husband, and this is the first time she's going to let herself go a little bit, or she's like, experimenting with flirtation with, she's walking the knife's edge here with Astrov, letting herself have these feelings. Yeah, so it's an interesting parallel, and I think kind of works the same way in both stories. And it's a way that we're sort of using Romeo and Juliet and making it our own and like translating it into our story. So I think it's a great example of what we're doing throughout the whole piece.
Yeah, it's fascinating because, if you think about Shakespeare uses so many metaphors, and if you think about the metaphor of maidenhood as just a new experience.
Yes.
Right. And so This is a new experience in the sense, but with a sexual bent, but still something like you're anticipating with the same kind of anticipation you might do losing your virginity, but it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, and it has darkness to it that, isn't really there in Juliet, which is where I think that happens in almost all of our speeches and our Shakespeare and our plays, that you're bringing some kind of ugly baggage from Uncle Vanya, from the world of jaded adulthood. And I think that's what makes it interesting and relatable to an audience in a new way.
In this imaginary moment, which of the playwrights do you think speaks more authentically to your experience as a woman?
Well, I don't know. I think that I find something in both, and then that's why the combination, I think, sits in a good place in my heart when I'm performing in our play, because I think that idea, it's that feeling of that crushing, soul crushing, like excitement, can't breathe love, that we have to keep chasing as actors in Romeo and Juliet. It's a feeling I know, and I think everybody can identify with. And that part of me is really, it's sort of something that it feels really good to go there and to revisit that feeling.
It's not something that as people that are approaching middle age, we often get to re-experience, is it?
Yeah, and it's like, I have love in my life, and I have that, I know that feeling, what the first moment felt like, what the moment I knew it was going to happen felt like, all those wonderful moments, and like to play that every night on stage is really, really magical. And then the also as an actor, this is just a side note about me, which is that my whole career, ever since I was a kid, I was playing character roles. So the idea of being an ingenue and just being able to experience those feelings with an audience, in front of an audience, is new to me. I've always been the old curmudgeon or the, comic relief or whatever. So standing on stage,
the nurse at 19 and the Juliet at 39.
Yes, exactly. And so, I was the nurse when I was 17. So the kind of bringing that feeling up in myself is like, I think this is part of why I'm so happy doing this play and feel all kind of new feelings, And similarly with the Yelena, I feel like that's a character I really identify with too, because she's just, I think all of us have traps that we've put ourselves in. And to me, when I first started working on the role of Yelena, it's not like she's just some hot girl who's, just kind of traipsing around. I think she's super insecure, and she gets her worth in ways from the people around her, from how she's defined in her relationships. And in our play, this sort of her role in Uncle Vanya, where she's got this husband, she's got this love interest in the doctor, and then because of the Romeo and Juliet parallel, we're really heightening her relationship with Vanya, and that there's some sort of, not only is he sort of in love with her and she's like annoyed by him the way it is in a lot of versions of Uncle Vanya, but in our play, there is some sort of a deep friendship there that gives her something really important as a woman. So it's like she has basically three guys that she loves in different ways in the play that also kind of, oppress her or define her in ways against her own will in the play too. So it's like she's super Juliet in that way, that she's like defined as a love interest. And so I think that playing that moment where Yelena waits for Astrov it's a different shade of the same color, that feeling that Juliet feels. So it's almost like kind of playing the beginning and the end of an experience.
Yeah, and the idea of, like, not to use a pun, but the idea of unbridled anticipation.
Yeah, and it's like, that's what I'm finding so interesting too in this process is I'm a little, I'm super jaded, sarcastic, I think I'm pretty dry, and I don't often go on flights of fancy or sort of just like whole hog jump off the building emotionally, you know what I mean? And so like when I can get inside of those moments, it feels really like I'm just opening myself up. And I guess it's, why be an actor, to have these kind of great transformative moments for me. And I think that when I get the Juliet stuff right in those little moments, I can feel a connection with the audience, especially the women in the audience, in a really good way.
I mean, that's so interesting because one of our questions was going to be playing a middle-aged Juliet. What do you learn? And I think you just really eloquently said that.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's like, feels good. And I think that in a way, what we're doing in this play, what we've done is we've almost taken the Shakespeare as actors, thrown ourselves into that, and it's helping us find things in the Chekhovian characters. So because I'm Juliet, because I'm basically saying that there's a part of Yelena that's Juliet, and if I'm committing entirely and going down the road as Juliet, and then I come back to a moment of Yelena, it's like I'm inevitably changed. Like I'm definitely fuller and have a new understanding of, what makes her up, which I think is really nice, and it's right for Chekhov. Like it's the right way to do Chekhov.
Well, this wouldn't be a State of Shakespeare podcast if we didn't get a little bit nerdy about the text. So I have a text related question for you, and it has to do with one of the most famous excerpts from this speech. And for those of us who are following along with the text on our website, it starts at line 21, and it's "Give me my Romeo." And in the version that we have, it says, "Give me my Romeo, and when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars." And in the version that you just read, there's a change there. And I wondered if you could comment on that.
Well, the "I shall die" is from the Oxford. When I first learned it, I was doing he, and I had always heard he. But I think I don't have like the nerdy text answer as to like what the root of the difference is. But I know that playing it I is more active for me because in a way, this experience it's entirely internal, and I feel like it, in these kind of moments of really heightened like anticipation, lust, love, passion, the other person is almost interchangeable. It's a feeling, like, and so I feel like to follow it through, give me Romeo, give me this moment, this is how it's going to change me, is more important. It's more playable, actually. But yeah, the I came from the Oxford.
Oh, that's great.
I think the best audiences that we have for this play are the ones that are super Shakespeare nerds, because then they get like a kick out of it, with the little shifts that we do, and they think, oh, it's so cool how they did that there, or wow, they're going to do that now, and I so you can feel the energy off of those people, and like those are the same people that I think their ear hits on something that we're doing that's a little different than what they're used to, and then it's like a nice little jolt.
For those lucky Shakespeare nerds who can still get a ticket, where is the show happening?
It's happening at a space called ART New York, which is a really beautiful new theater on 53rd between 10th and 11th. And, they can get tickets at Bedlam's website, which is bedlam.org, I believe. So,
it goes through October 28th?
October 28th, yeah. And we would love to have as many Shakespeare nerds as possible. But we're going to be irreverent, playful, maybe wrong sometimes, but we're trying something on for size, and we're going to try it out wholeheartedly and just go in 100%, which is, I think, all you can really ask for from a troupe of performers.
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, congratulations on this really exciting production. We can't wait to see it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for spending some time talking with us today.
I really appreciate it, and thank you for letting me talk about my exciting new role.
Yeah, roles.
My role is the wrapped into one.
Well, I'm Garrett Vandermeer.
And I'm Jim Elliott.
And thank you for listening to The State of Shakespeare.
Zuzanna, that was fantastic. Oh my God, you make me want to see this play.
Oh, good. Yeah, come see it.
Thanks for joining us for the State of Shakespeare podcast. We invite you to visit stateofshakespeare.com for more episodes, information about each of our guests, and the Shakespeare text you heard on the program, and much more. And we welcome you to join the discussion by liking us on Facebook. That's www.stateofshakespeare.com. Thanks for listening.